much for Dr. Aquilino, for Dr. Dino, for Lima, for everybody here, and also you, the one that are watching us, the one that is saying hi and hello to us, and the one that says yes to us. Thank you so much for being here once again in this morning time for Argentina, for Mexico, and for El Salvador. Thank you for watching us again in this Planetarium Congress for the third day of us. Today we're having a MEM international panel. We're having great speakers as we all did in these 3 days. I will be presenting you our speakers. They are from Australia, from Philippines, and from Hong Kong, Japan. So welcome Andrew Best, Ludwig Federian, and Gerard Escalera. Hi Andrew, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak.
Hi Ludwig, how are you?
I'm good, Kari. Thank you so much for having me in this event.
Oh, it was our pleasure to have you everyone here. And Gerard is like meeting us right now. He's having trouble from internet and network connection in there where he is. But we're going to start anyway with our guest speaker from Australia, Andrew Best. And for everybody that doesn't know him, I will tell him that Andrew Best retired from full-time work in public schools. He spent the last 26 years of his career as a school principal, leading 4 school communities. He has a passion for leadership and spent several years on the NSW Primary Principals Association's Leadership Working Party. Here we go. Andrew trained as a facilitator for he spent the last 20 years of highly effective people and great teams, great leaders, great results, and signature programs. He trained with Al Gore in 2006 as a leader in his climate reality project, and in 2007 was awarded with the NSW Primary Principals Association's Professional Award for Outstanding Leadership. He's an environmental education in as Andrew's passion is one of that. He was awarded a Churchill Fellowship to study environmental education and student engagement in the UK and USA. His school, Harrington Park, PS, became Australia's first registered eco school in 2014. That's awesome, Andrew. We are so expecting your presentation. Please, hold on. Hello, Gerard, you're here. Yay, you make it.
Apologies, had some technical difficulty.
We are so glad to have you here. Thank you so much. We will begin with Andrew. Andrew, please, we're expecting your presentation so much.
Okay, thanks. Can I share my screen now?
Yes, please.
Well, g'day, as we say in Australia. It's midnight here, and I believe it's the morning in Argentina, about 20 past 10. And so g'day works well, no matter what time of day. You already know a little bit about me, so I'm just going to go straight into it. I'd like to pay my respects to the Indigenous elders of the Darawal people, and they're the original custodians of the land which I'm speaking from. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders, both past, present, and emerging, and to any Indigenous people who might be watching today. I've got 3 slides here from an Indigenous carver on the south coast of New South Wales. He said, "Everything created is around us, we're just part of it, but you teach your children behind doors, and you thank your creator behind walls." Now, I'm going to share with you a few slides taken from a book written by Hedley Bear into the year 2000, but it's about projecting to the year 2025, so 5 years time. And these were his predictions, and they had a big impact on me when I read it in the year 2000. So I thought it was worth sharing some of these things with you now. So the future's child, where I live and work, will be multinational, multicultural, multi-faith, and white people may be the ethnic minority. You can see there's some of the children at my school, St. Helens Park, which I was at for 10 years, and they're having a swim in the Georges River. We'll be looking at a planet-wide economy in another 5 years' time, controlled not by big nations, but by big business networks. Regional trade centers like Singapore, Bangkok, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Buenos Aires, and Sydney. Nationality will not matter. The world is much smaller. People move about, but not at the moment, I guess, because of the COVID virus. Workplaces will be internationalized, and we'll live in a borderless world. If you look at these two pictures, You can see on the right the picture of the Earth. I can't see any borders there, and I know that what happens in one country will happen everywhere else because we all share this one planet. It's our only home. Thor Heyerdahl, who was a Norwegian explorer who sailed from South America to Australia, said that borders, I have never seen one, but I've heard they exist in the minds of some people. Sadly, that is the case. Excuse me, I just got a drink of water. Now, the world population in 1900 was 1.6 billion people. Now there are over 7 billion people on the planet. 25 million people live in Australia. Now, my father's lifespan was 1932 to 2009, and he saw just in one life the population of the world increase by more than 1 billion people. So we really have become, as David Suzuki puts it, a force of nature. With the environment, by the time the person in the book was to start work, environmental responsibilities would be enforced internationally. If not, the world would be threatened by green wars, access to water, topsoil, power, and food. The prediction was that this person would live in a smart home wired to carry out electronic shopping, food preparation, and household chores. That already happens. By the time this person would be in their 20s, Chinese and Indians would make up more than half of the world's population, and the world's largest Muslim population is Indonesia, which is Australia's closest neighbour. So what are the educational implications? Dennis Fitzgerald, who was the president of the New South Wales Teachers Federation, said that teachers will need to be knowledge navigators, helping people to discover what they need, not just what they want. I will need to learn about Islam at school and also about Confucian societies, which produce economic success and social cohesion. My schooling must teach me about living comfortably in a multicultural, multinational, and multi-faith world. Do you know what an international curriculum looks like and how it can be taught? My school says I need to be a global citizen. I know what that means. I hope you do. Most of all, I want to be wise over what to believe about me and my world. I want to know what the wisest people on earth believe. I want the world to be a beautiful place for my grandchildren. My school's teachers are very important to me because they tell me how to deal with the future, the long, long future. Are you confident that you can design and deliver a curriculum that will equip me to live in my world? I'm 5 years old and I'm sitting in one of your classrooms today. Now, that was written in the year 2000, so the person now would be 25 years old, and he was predicting what would happen by the time they were 30, and already a lot of those things have started to happen. So that led me to think, well, what do I do as a school principal, and how do I help children? And I, as has already been mentioned, am a great fan of Stephen Covey's work. He wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he talked about circles of influence. Now, proactive people work within their circle of influence. They work where they know they can have an influence, and if they do, that circle grows bigger and it eventually envelops their circle of concern. So that's what I started to do. And I was at St. Helens Park when I really started to get into environmental education from 1996 to 2006. By 2005, I was on the National Planning Forum representing New South Wales, which is the state that I live in, to look at what was called the Australian Sustainable Schools Initiative. And from there, the next year, I was invited to join Al Gore. But when I sat down in solitude to the labours of my profession, the only questions I asked myself were, what is right, what is just, and what is for the public good? Well, the next year I was with Al Gore for the first time. You can see me on the left there walking through the Botanic Gardens in Sydney. And then the second photo where I've got less hair on top of my head and more on my chin, it was last year at the training in Brisbane where I helped mentor some new trainees in the Climate Reality Project. And I've been involved in that project ever since and mentored some more people virtually in July this year, where we trained another 10,000 presenters. So on that journey, this was 2007 in Australia. This is the Darling River, and you can see the girl just skipping across. You perhaps would have difficulty believing that paddle steamers used to travel up that river, and this is how the drought has impacted on it. But it's a more recent picture. This was taken last year, and the drought in the Murray-Darling Basin, which is Australia's food bowl in a lot of ways was the worst this century, or worst in a century. Menindee lakes are just downstream from where those photos were taken, and hundreds of thousands of fish died in the heat wave last year in January. We had bushfires in 2009 in Victoria, which were very bad. You can see the devastation that they wreaked through these next few slides. That's an iconic picture that was transmitted fairly well right around the world. A koala, which sadly did pass away not long after that photo was taken. But there we look at Australia's annual temperature, and you can see it climbing about 1.5 degrees above the mean, which was in 1961. The average annual temperature in Australia could rise 5.1 degrees Celsius in this century. If that does happen, it would be catastrophic. A rise of 2 degrees would see us lose the Murray-Darling as our food bowl, and that produces 75% of Australia's irrigated produce. Heat waves in Australia are now more likely to happen 5 times more than normal, more likely because of global warming. If you look at the mean temperature there, you can see how it's growing. About 8 years ago, we had an angry summer and things were pretty bad. But then in 2018, we had a really terrible summer, which became known as the angriest summer. And here are some impacts right across the country. I'm not going to read them all out. I'll just leave it up for a few seconds, but you can see that everywhere in Australia was affected, every state and every territory. Now, the chance of getting that record summer temperatures across Australia due to natural variability alone was less than 1 in a million. That comment came from Professor David Carroley, who is one of our leading experts in climate change in Australia. There's Melbourne in January last year. This is an interesting fact, but Australia was the hottest place on the earth in mid-January 2019. If you look of the 100 hottest locations on earth on January the 24th, 2019, 91 were in Australia. Here's Sydney, 2018. It was 47.3 degrees Celsius, the city's hottest day in almost 80 years. This was quite scary. The Hume Highway is the main road between Sydney and Melbourne, and there was a 10-kilometre stretch of road that was melting in the heat. 2019 was Australia's warmest year since national records began in 1910, and 2020 is looking just as bad. You can see the change in forest fire danger between 1978 and 2017. Fire seasons are longer now and they're more intense. We've already started to have bushfires and we're only just really into spring. A 2 degree Celsius increase in average global temperature could mean a 30% increase in extreme rainfall events for Australia, because what goes up must come down. And we've had massive flooding. Townsville received a year's worth of rain in 1 week. We lost 500,000 cattle in the Queensland floods in February last year. If you look at this picture, it's a Flinders River system. That was on January the 7th, 2019. And here's another satellite photo a month later, February the 10th. And after years of drought, the river swelled to 59 kilometres across in a matter of weeks. Forbes is in New South Wales. The town where I live, Picton, had 2 metres of water flow down the main street 4 years ago. And we had something like 20 inches of rain in 2 hours. The Great Barrier Reef is famous world over, but marine heat waves, extreme El Nino events, and the ocean acidification are putting the future of the reef at risk. And it creates about $9 billion a year in tourism, or it did until the coronavirus came along. But we have, since 2015, a bleaching event which lasted for 3 years, and it was the worst ever recorded on the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef has lost half of its coral cover in the last 30 years, and 30% of that just since 2016. We also get cyclones in our country, mainly up in the northern tropical areas, but Cyclone Trevor made its second landfall as Cyclone Veronica approached Western Australia. And then we have Cyclone Damien in the Pilbara on the west coast of Australia, and they're currently assessing the damage. That was earlier this year. Now, if you look at water stress by country, you can see Australia is extremely highly stressed. It's one of the world's most highly water stressed countries. This is Cataract Dam. It's not far from where I live. It's probably 15 kilometres away from where I live. And the dam levels were below 50% for Sydney last year, and we were put onto water restrictions as a result of that. Gunnedah in New South Wales and parts of Eastern Australia are experiencing the worst drought in living memory. This is Dubbo in New South Wales, where we had a huge dust storm with the dust being blown in from the desert. We've had dust storms like this also in Sydney, where you couldn't see more than 50 metres. That was in 2009, was a really bad one. And then we had fires again last summer. Prolonged heat dries out vegetation, making it more susceptible to burning. Here's an aerial photo from space, actually, of New South Wales, the state where I live, pre-bushfires and post-bushfires, and you can see how much vegetation was burnt out. We had more than 1 million hectares in the fire that came quite close to where I live. But as of January the 30th, more than 11.7 million hectares have been burned across the country's 6 states. That's an area over 3 times the size of Belgium. "33 people lost their lives. In a village that's about 10 kilometres from where I live, 3 firefighters were killed when a tree fell on their fire truck. We had a friend lose her house, and other people were evacuated to our place when the fires were at their worst. Koalas, but we had an estimated 1 billion animals that died from the fires last summer, including an estimated 1/3 of all koalas in New South Wales alone. And they face a double threat. And we now risk losing up to 50% of all land-based species in this century. Sea turtle sex is determined by temperature, and at the northern edge of Australia's Great Barrier Reef, 99% of young green sea turtles are now female, which causes all sorts of problems for their survival. The dock-billed platypus quickly overheat when exposed to warm temperatures. This is sad. 1/3 of Australia's spectacled flying foxes have been killed by the summer 2018-2019 heat wave and the ongoing drought. And that is really sad because they're one of the major pollinators for our eucalypt forest. So if they all die out, the forest probably won't keep going, and we might lose them by the end of the century also. We have massive erosion with the sea damage, with sea level rise. This is just a northern suburb of Sydney, but we've had other places at Newcastle, just north of Sydney, about 50 miles or 80 kilometres north of Sydney. They're suffering greatly as well, with people losing their homes into the sea. But leaders are dealers in hope, Napoleon Bonaparte told us. And this is why I'm hopeful. I strongly believe that we can beat this problem of climate change, and we have the solutions at hand. It's not a silver bullet. There's lots of silver buckshot. But let me share some good news with you. If you look at green energy progress, in 2000, worldwide wind capacity was to reach 30 gigawatts by 2010. This is a reality.
Andrew?
Yes?
You have 20 seconds.
20 seconds?
Yes.
I'll just flick through them quickly.
Okay.
I won't talk. Nearly 2 million residential properties in Australia now have solar systems. That's 1 in 5 houses. Wind farms are springing up everywhere. Solar energy capacity is increasing dramatically. And we have the world's highest average solar resource. You can see clean energy investments risen to nearly $10 billion. We now have renewable energy industries. Now, leadership, resolute leadership is morally driven. That's my wife and my 2 grandchildren. They're a bit older than that now. That was taken in 2011. Our state government only gave that as a target, but if you look, I'm not going to go through all of these now. You can see that every state government has opted to get to net zero emissions by 2050. Now, the world itself rests upon the breath of the children in the schoolhouse. Greta Thunberg has done great things, and children really are rallying around Australia now. We have a national curriculum, and one of the strands which overarches all subject areas is sustainability. Eco schools, which we've mentioned, is now operating in every state and territory in Australia. And here's how I'd like to finish. It's 3:23 in the morning and I'm awake because of my great-great-grandchildren asking me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons were failing, as the mammals, reptiles and birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protests when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew? My question to you is, what will you do? Thanks for listening. Okay.
Thank you so much for that. Amen for that. And I think that everybody here shares the same thought. So thank you, Andrew. It was amazing. Now we're going to go with Gerard Scaler, and then we have Mr. Frederick and Mr. Ludwig at the end. So Gerard, I will introduce to the people that are watching us to know who you are, okay? Gerard Scaler is the co-founder and chief marketing officer at Lyrium Venture Partners Limited. His remit includes exploring sustainable innovation and opportunities for future growth, shaping the brand across core markets, developing new approaches to managing complexity, and building capabilities around evolving market trends. He has a proven track record of increasing profitability and brand equity for blue chip and Fortune 1000 companies with revenues above $1 billion, as well as fast growth technology ventures. He's an advisory board member for several tech companies, a director of the Manila chapter for the Founder Institute, a mentor for former US Vice President Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, and a member of the Forbes Communications Council. Management at Northwestern University, has received his executive MBA from the Kellogg School and a postgraduate diploma in digital business from Columbia Business School and MIT Sloan. He holds a chartered marketer certification as well as a certification in digital marketing from Columbia Business School. Wow, thank you so much for that, Gerard. Thank you for having us here. Thank you for being our guest speaker too. So we are expecting your presentation. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Let me just share my screen really quickly. Sorry, can everybody see the screen?
Yes, now yes.
Okay, let's get started. Okay, so thank you for that very kind introduction, Carrie. As Carrie mentioned, I'm here to talk about recent developments in Hong Kong as they relate to climate change and sustainable innovation. Just a quick note that there is a lot of data on the slides, most of which we're only going to touch upon. So if you'd like a copy of this presentation, just send me an email and I'll forward it to you. The first part of this presentation will highlight the Hong Kong's climate action plan for 2030 onwards. And for the second part, we'll head into a few examples of sustainable innovation from Hong Kong and elsewhere and wrap up with what's needed next. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, climate change may raise sea level as much as 1 meter globally towards the end of the century and increase the threats of storm surges. Consequently, the storm surge could subject coastal areas to inundation or increased frequency of flooding. Like all coastlines, Hong Kong's coastal areas will be under increasing stress and become more vulnerable to sea level rise. So what you're looking at here is this chart shows the projections in mean sea level rise in Hong Kong under high and medium low greenhouse gas concentration scenarios. With the exception of some low-lying areas, the risk of coastal inundation due solely to sea level rise in Hong Kong is generally low, but we can expect more frequent flooding due to storm surges during adverse weather. Hong Kong's Civil Engineering and Development Department, the CEDD, has commissioned studies to review the climate change effects based on the model outputs of AR5, which is the IPCC's fifth assessment report, and its implications on the design of coastal infrastructures. According to China Water Risk, which is a Hong Kong-based nonprofit, Hong Kong is at risk of storm tides at 5.87 meters brought about by typhoons by as early as 2030. And this would impact large swaths of Kowloon and Hong Kong Island. Central, which you can see here, is Hong Kong's financial district, including IFC, Exchange Square, and the headquarters of HSBC and Standard Chartered, would also be inundated, as can be seen on this slide. This has implications for almost 3/4 of Hong Kong's GDP due to vulnerabilities to the real estate, trade, and financial sectors. According to the Hong Kong government, the major impacts Hong Kong is susceptible to as a direct result of climate change include threats to biodiversity, physical infrastructure, its economy, energy supply, financial system, food supply and security, health, and access to clean water. Because of this, there is some measure of urgency in moving towards a more sustainable plan, which leads me to my next point. The Hong Kong Climate Action Plan 2030 Plus report was published by the Environment Bureau in January 2017 under the leadership of former Hong Kong SCR Chief Executive C.Y. Leung. It represents the dedicated work of 16 government agencies in support of the Steering Committee on Climate Change, led by the Chief Secretary for Administration. This report sets out Hong Kong's new carbon emissions reduction target for 2030 and the concerted plans for implementation. It calls for not only the work of government, but also the participation and contribution of business and the community at large. So this is the latest document, and to the best of my knowledge, there's not been any further updates to this that are publicly available. The 2030 carbon emissions targets set out in the plan include per capita carbon emissions between 3.3 to 3.8 tons, absolute carbon emissions reduction between 26 to 36%, and carbon intensity reduction target of 65 to 70%. Hong Kong also plays a part to help fulfill the obligations that China has under the Paris Agreement. And as such, Hong Kong will need to review our climate change efforts every 5 years and align them with the submission timelines under the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement can be distilled into a simple 4T framework that can be understood and operationalized for the government, business, and community. The essential elements, which you see here, include setting targets with timelines, ensuring there are transparent metrics to track results, and for everyone to work together. Hong Kong's carbon reduction plan includes phasing down coal for electricity generation and replacing it with natural gas by 2030. Currently, about 70% of Hong Kong's carbon emissions still come from electricity generation, despite the decision in 1997 not to build new coal-fired electricity generating plants. The most appropriate and available large-scale replacement technology for Hong Kong is natural gas-fired electricity generation. To meet our new carbon intensity reduction target of 65 to 70% by 2030, Hong Kong will phase down coal-fired electricity generation, since coal is the most carbon-intensive fuel in our fuel mix. That means that we will continue to phase down Hong Kong's remaining coal plants as they reach their normal retirement life in the next decade and replace them with natural gas and non-fossil fuel sources. Hong Kong doesn't have optimal conditions for large-scale commercial renewable energy generation because it only has a land area of 1,106 square kilometers, most of which is hilly terrain. Our territorial waters are also limited. But having said that, based on currently mature and commercial available technologies, the government's estimate is that Hong Kong has about 3 to 4% of realizable renewable energy potential arising from wind, solar, and waste to energy that can be exploited between now and 2030. It's important to note that that estimate does not include options that have not yet been explored and possible near-term technological advancement. The government's aim is to apply renewable energy on a wider and larger scale based on available technologies with the public sector taking the lead and to create the conditions to enable the private sector to consider adopting renewable energy. Over the longer term, we anticipate that new technologies will develop which could enhance impact in this area and which Hong Kong can adopt where appropriate. While Hong Kong will continue to improve energy saving for new buildings, the main focus for this plan is also on existing buildings and public infrastructure. A 4T partnership with the major commercial and institutional building owners to upgrade existing buildings will also help stimulate a local energy efficiency market. And changing behavior in energy use and management through partnership is also a priority. The Hong Kong government also published an energy saving plan, which lays out an overall 40% energy intensity reduction target by 2025 using 2005 as the base. It represents the foundation from which Hong Kong plans its energy saving work and designs its action for 2030. On stimulating an energy efficiency market, the government is working on retro-commissioning and retrofitting projects of government buildings. Property developers and managers have also started to issue green bonds that include retrofitting existing buildings. The 4T's partnership with public sector bodies, as well as with the private property sector, will also help to stimulate the energy efficiency market in the years ahead. Hong Kong has a well-developed public transport system with railway as its backbone. The government's aim is to provide an efficient, reliable, and environmentally friendly transport system with multimodal choices that meet the community's needs. Key actions include extending rail services, as well as improving all public transport services, including smarter road usage management so that public transport remains the preferred choice of commuters, and so that Hong Kong's transport sector retains a low level of transport-related emissions per capita. The government's policy also includes improving the planning of and design for universal accessibility with connecting infrastructure, suitable for the city's vertical topography to enable more people to walk for short and medium distances. Partnership with public transport operators, including the airport, to trial new technologies and reduce energy is also a top priority. This is just an example to show that Hong Kong is moving forward with its development of gas power plants, wind and hydro power, solar, waste to energy, and other areas committed to in its plan. Now we'll take a quick look at some examples of how the startup ecosystem is innovating around sustainability to curb climate change. Our Conscious Kitchen takes climate action down to the individual level. It provides a platform that offers culinary nutrition and plant-based food coaching, information, and products that empower people to move towards a healthy plant-based lifestyle. Our Conscious Kitchen focuses on encouraging a switch from a primarily meat-based to more of a plant-based diet. The thinking is that rather than switching consumers to an exclusively plant-based diet, by simply reducing the overall demand on meat consumption, it benefits both the individual and the environment. Another company is GEB Impact Technology, which exists to provide technologically advanced, environmentally sustainable products and processes that harness the potential of renewable resources. As a Hong Kong-based premium biotechnology company—
Gerard, I'm sorry, you have 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
That cultivates microalgae, the company engineers and designs production processes to meet healthy lifestyle market demands. Part of what they do also involves food tech to create meatless food options. And if anybody would like more information on GEB Impact or Our Conscious Kitchen, send me a note and I'll connect you with the respective founders. I'm just going to skip over and focus on one more example before wrapping up. Bluefield is a US-based company, but I met the CEO in Hong Kong and I found what they were doing to be fairly innovative, which is why I'm highlighting them here. In its own words, Bluefield provides independent, direct, and timely emissions data, making the invisible visible and allowing clients to make the most informed decisions. Its BFX2 advanced emission detection algorithm continuously analyzes satellite data around the world, offering actionable insights. So basically, they collect and sell macro data, and which they then supply to aerospace and defense firms, consulting companies, accountancies, government agencies, and multilateral institutions. To quickly sum up, my own perspective in terms of what's needed next includes updating the Hong Kong Climate Action Plan. As I mentioned, this hasn't been updated since 2017, and a revised document with 2020 statistics would be helpful to all stakeholders for forward planning. Diversifying ideas, because Hong Kong can be quite insular. The government could engage with regional counterparts to innovate new ideas. Thirdly, engage with multinationals, which the government is currently doing, but perhaps there may be more abundant opportunities in terms of leveraging their sustainability programs. Fourthly, engaging with startups, which while they may not be as well capitalized as some larger firms, they tend to be agile and innovative, and providing some form of financial or tax incentive can help spur innovation. And lastly, have transparent reporting, which is essential, because the more data there is that is publicly available around this initiative, the more stakeholders will benefit over the longer term. So that concludes my presentation. I'll now hand back over to Carrie for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gerard. I mean, every speech, every exposition, every presentation that we have here, it's amazing. It's a blessing to have you here with us. The Q&A will be like at the end of the table in the panel. If we have any time, I want to just the public watch the presentation from Ludwig from Philippines. So we're going ahead with that. Thank you so much, Gerard. So we are having now the Philippines. Mr. Ludwig Ferderican, he's a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Engineering at Don Bosco Technical College, Philippines, as top 5 of the graduating class and as president of the College Student Council. He completed his master's in Business Administration MBA at the University of San Carlos, Philippines, topping the USC Graduate School Comprehensive Examinations and as president of the Graduate Students Organization. He finished his strategic business economics program, graduated with merit at the University of Asia and the Pacific, Philippines in 2008. He completed his diploma supply chain management under the Business and Training Linkage Program of the PUM Entrepreneurs for Entrepreneurs, The Hague, Netherlands, in the same year. And he was awarded the ACE Chairman Scholarship to attend the ACE Ashridge Executive Development Program at the Ashridge Business School in United Kingdom. Also, he is a recipient of various recognition. Among these include the Miguel R. Mangalang Individual Climate Leadership Memorial Award, awarded by the Climate Reality Project, and also in Climate and Dangal NG Kalikasan Award by the Mr. Earth Philippines Organization for Unselfish Acts to be a constant inspiration to young people. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. We are so blessed to have you here as Andrew and Gerard. Please, Mr. Lewis, start your presentation.
Good evening, Carrie. Thank you so much for this invitation. Let me just share again my screen. Don't worry, this will not be very long. This would be very short. I only prepared 20 slides, and I will not be talking about so technical terms here. I would prefer to bring this issue to the masses. So this is the climate crisis, the Philippine story. What you see in the front is actually the rice terraces that was built way back 2,000 years ago by the indigenous people of Ifugao. Of course, I think Gerald is also know this place, being a Filipino by himself. Okay, like in these pandemic times, tourism in the Philippines is pretty bad. Even with the pandemic, we know that the impacts of the climate change remains. So in the rice terraces, it's a very nice loop, on a regular weather. But of course, this area is very sensitive to the impacts of the climate change. Aside from warming temperature and increase in extreme weather events, these are the major problems that you'll see in the northern part of the Philippines. And this actually affects the entire rice production in that particular area. And the rice variety that's been developed over the years cannot adapt to a very warm climate, no, that is hitting the Philippines as of the moment. No. Aside from climate change, of course, there are more migration of young people from rural areas moving to urban centers. No. So this is just a classic example how climate change impact the Philippines. And we know that Philippines being located in a tropical area and separated by waters, no, because we are an archipelago composed of over 7,000 islands, remains to be highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And numerous studies have already validated the vulnerability of the Philippines to the impacts of climate change. So how vulnerable the Philippines is, no, to the impact of climate change. The photo that you'll see here is actually a photo that happened during Typhoon Haiyan or Typhoon Yolanda that hit the Philippines in 2013. During that year, that was considered the most destructive typhoon that happened in the country. Total losses for this typhoon reached almost 95 billion pesos. Over 6,000 people died in this area. No, this very popular area became very popular area because of Typhoon Haiyan. Philippines, based on the Global Climate Risk Index 2020, is the most affected country in the year 2018 alone, and the fourth most affected country from the year 1999 until 2018. Okay, and if you're going to trickle down, I mean, to look at the data of this report, out of the top 10 countries, the Philippines have actually the most number of extreme weather events. No, the Philippines would have around, based on projection, over 22 typhoons in a year. Around 18 of that, or 65% of that, would make a landfall, no, in any part of the country. Another projection, this was made by Global Peace Index 2019 that came out sometime of May of last year. Philippines leads the countries with the highest risk of climate hazards. No? In these two reports, you'll be able to see that Philippines is actually belonging to the top 10% most vulnerable country. The latest report that came out just this year from the Ecological Threat Register 2020, Philippines is a second natural disaster hotspot in terms of cyclones, next only to Japan. No? So every year, Philippines would always welcome typhoons. It may be category 3 most of the time, except Typhoon Haiyan, which was almost category 5. Okay. So let me just share with you the Philippine climate outlook. This was a comprehensive study done by different government agencies in the Philippines, led by both Climate Change Commission and Pag-asa. Generally, the Philippines received 5 climate change impacts. One is increase of the temperature. So during summertime in the country, heat index here would sometimes hit as high as over 50% in some parts of the country. Of course, there are changes in precipitation patterns. When we look at typhoon, we no longer have to measure it in terms of wind, but we also have to consider the amount of rainfall it would bring, both in the rural and in the urban centers. Of course, Philippines, being an archipelago, is threatened by sea level rise, and most of the coastal communities are scattered all over the Philippines. I would have a special slide on that, on the impact of sea level rise throughout the country. Of course, we also experience ocean acidification, similar to what happened to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And lastly, we are not exempted to any extreme climate events, be it in the north or in the south. This is the new normal. Whether there's a pandemic or not, this is happening. No? That's why even with the projection of the La Nina coming in this last quarter of the year until 2021, I believe that the government have already given advisory so that people would be more prepared on the impacts of La Nina. So these actually the patterns of distribution of major rainfall changes in the Philippines, just to show you a sample projection for 2020 and 2050. Both provinces with having more rains, and provinces having less rains. No, so those provinces having less rains may be potential provinces in terms of drought. Therefore, planting season would be affected, and crop harvesting would also be affected. Recently, in a study done by Filipino scientists in central
Mr.
Mindanao,
Ludwig,
yes.
you have 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, don't worry, don't worry. We would expect declines in precipitation, which threatens both food and water security. Philippines sea level rise is expected 3 times higher than the global average. Over 64 coastal provinces will be affected. 822 coastal municipalities, practically half of the total local government units in the Philippines, and 25 major coastal cities. Practically 60% of local government units will be affected by sea level rise, that will affect 13.6 million Filipinos for relocation. In the recent report of the global report on internal displacement, actually Philippines is one of the top countries together with China in terms of displacement due to natural events and internal conflict. Philippines, based on IPCC projections for the year 2051 to 2060, would have a decrease in terms of the potential sea catch by as much as 50% if we compare it to 2001 to 2010 levels. So that's why when I give presentations in the Philippines, I would always ask our people to compare the size of the fishes that they get at present time, and perhaps compare it on the size of the fishes that their grandparents would get when they were young, in their teens. No, and this report was actually corroborated by a World Bank study together with Asian Development Bank, saying that the entire Southeast Asia, not only Philippines, would have a fish catch drop by as much as 50%. So let me just share my last slide. This is actually a video that I did for Climate Reality Project, calling all people, regardless of your location, how do we act for the Philippines. No? So if I can just play this, a very short video, less than 2 minutes.
Let me remind the youth of today that climate change is not an apocalypse. Climate change is not about the movies The Day After Tomorrow, 2020, or Geostorm. Climate change is not only about ice sheets melting, wildfires, or extreme weather events. Climate change is about us. Climate change is about you and me. So let us all use our power to change climate change.
So again, that's it, Carrie. This is my last page. Thank you so much for having me here again.
Thank you so much. Wow, we had wonderful presentations from Australia, from Japan, Hong Kong, from Philippines. Thank you so much for the three of us here walking in climate change, that it is real and we have hope. Thank you so much for every presentation. Thank you so much. So thank you for all the public watching us. We don't have time for Q&A. We will send an email for our guest speakers if they have any reply to your questions, and we will send an email to you for their replies to you, okay? Thank you so much for everybody here watching us. I am welcoming you for the next international panel that we're having in 10 minutes. So